Hey guys, welcome back to the Great Ace Attorney Chronicles! Resolve. In the last episode, we started the cross-examination of Madame Tuspels, who happens to have a work that is very significant to us, which is a wax work of the professor who was the killer from 10 years ago, who killed not all of the aristocracy and royalty in Britain, but a lot of people. And that wax work is clearly linked to our case, and we are supposed to prove that there is a link. And we have something very fishy going on, as we stated in the last episode, because she claims that it was before the onset of rigor mortis that she took so long, because the corpse wasn't stiff yet. And that is very weird, because we do have the autopsy report here by Dr. Scythe, and her name was Stevens back then, and she confirms death by hanging confirmed at midnight. And rigor mortis wasn't an issue. So that is very fishy, and therefore, the only thing is, are we supposed to present that piece of evidence here, or here? So I guess it is here, because this states clearly rigor mortis, and I'm going to present the autopsy report here right away.
Objection!
And I was right. Okay, cool. Madame Tuspels, I have here an autopsy report that was filed 10 years ago now. It confirms the death of the professor following his execution at the gallows. And is that a problem? I believe it is, because your testimony and a particular detail in the report completely contradict one another. Quoi? Are you going to explain yourself, my... Sorry, guys. Oh, sorry. Are you going to explain yourself, my Nipponese friend? According to her testimony, Madame Tuspels was creating her wax impression just before dawn. And at that time, rigor mortis had not yet set in. And am I correct so far, madam? You are, yes. As I said, the stiffening of the jaw is the first sign of rigor mortis, 2 to 3 hours after death. But the man's chin was limp, so he cannot have been dead for a long time. But on the other hand, if you look at Dr. Scythe's report, it quite clearly states the following. Death by hanging confirmed at midnight, 11th June. No. If the professor indeed died at midnight that day, then by the time you were sculpting his face, rigor mortis would... Oh, sorry guys, I have to take a sip. Sorry. Rigor mortis would already have set in. Oui, yes, you are right. The chin, it would have been completely stiff. In other words, this report is wrong.
Objection!
No coroner makes mistakes when recording the time of death. The very idea is absurd. In that case, there's only one possible conclusion. The execution didn't actually take place at the stated time. Impossible. Order! Counsel, this is beyond folly. Not only do you indict the author of the report, Dr. Scythe, but you also implicate members of staff at Berkeley Prison where the execution took place. By heck! Extraordinary! Not in my day! My learned friend appears to have overlooked one very crucial fact. What fact? The professor died that night, without question. He did! Of course he did! I moved the man's limp jaw with my own hands. There was no... Yes, the professor died that night. But what if he didn't die at the gallows? Didn't die at... Are you insane? What exactly are you suggesting did happen then, that case? It's almost impossible to believe, but it will explain the link between Dr. Scythe, the professor, and and that one other person of interest. I have evidence that will explain exactly what I'm suggesting happened that night.
Counsel, present the evidence at once. The evidence that allegedly explains what really happened on the night of the professor's execution.
Well, I think it's the 10-year-old article because it rises from the grave, so he wasn't dead.
Take that!
What happened that night is written very plainly in this newspaper article. Executed criminal returns in the dead of the night at local cemetery.
You're suggesting it was a corpse coming back from the dead now?
Well, if this article is to be believed, yes. The professor, assumed dead following his execution, emerged from his grave and was killed again.
Objection!
Don't be a fool. That's simply a rumor published by the gutter press.
Can you be certain of that?
Are you serious?
The point is, as the article says, that there was a witness to what happened.
My word, yes indeed.
Mais oui, the young man who stole in the cemetery by chance that night.
Objection!
Of course there was a witness. The story didn't write itself, but obviously the man made it all up.
And in any case, this was 10 years ago now. There would surely be no hope of finding it.
Objection!
On the contrary, my lord, we all know this witness well.
What?
Are you suggesting, counsel, that you've identified the person in question? That you know who claims to have seen these utterly incredible events take place?
Yes, my lord. In fact, you could say that he's right here before my very eyes.
You will substantiate your latest claim now then, counsel. Who is the alleged witness of this staggering scene from the cemetery 10 years ago?
Well, it's Mr. Drebber. We already established that when we were at the Waxwork Museum. Oh, there he is.
Take that!
The man in question is Mr. Enoch Drebber.
Drebber?
The previous witness?
The special exhibit in the House of Horrors at Madame Tussbell's Museum of Waxwork recreates the decade-old scene in great detail. The condemned criminal emerging from the grave, and beside the tomb, a young man with a lantern stumbling upon the terrifying sight. And that young man is a 10-year younger Mr. Enoch Drebber. Oh man.
Order, order, order! Surely not, counsel.
Drebber was there? In Logate Cemetery?
What is all this talk about, Mr. Drebber? Is the name significant?
Of course, Madame Tussbell doesn't know, does she? Yes, it's extremely significant, madam. To your situation as well, in fact.
What situation?
The theft of the Professor Waxwork from your museum some days ago was perpetrated by the very same man.
No! But that would mean...
Sorry.
Madame Tussbell's. It would appear you know the name Enoch Drebber.
Oui, yes, I know it. But from long ago in the past.
What?
Oh my!
Good gracious!
Explain yourself. Tell us everything you know.
Yes, of course.
Well, well, well.
The story of the young man and the terrible sight we witnessed in the cemetery 10 years ago was published in every single newspaper in London and throughout Great Britain. However, in all of the articles, the witness was simply described as a certain young man. No details were published about his identity. His name was never revealed. That is, apart from in one newspaper. The Daily Circus. It is the paper from which comes the article I have already shown the court.
He's saying that his full name was only publicized in that article.
Goodness me, yes, here it is. The university student who experienced this shocking event is Mr. Enoch Drebber, a disciple of science at the University of London and a resident of its student dorms.
Unbelievable. When I read the article, I went to meet with the man. His discovery of the condemned criminal coming back to life in the cemetery in the dead of the night would make a perfect exhibit for my house of horrors. Where was the truth or not?
I see. So you went to meet Mr. Drebber in order to sculpt the waxwork of the man, did you?
Exactement. He was studying science at the University of London in those days. He was just a poor student. I paid him £5 to model for the waxwork. And since that time, it has been in my museum to recreate the scene of the terror from the cemetery.
So 10 years ago, a young man appealed to the public about an extraordinary event he'd witnessed. A criminal who'd been put to death, re-emerging from his grave in the middle of the night. But the public treated his claim as nothing more than an amusing anecdote that was soon forgotten. 10 years later, the same man steals a waxwork model of the executed criminal, ostensibly to use as a body double for the victim in this case we're discussing here today. Even though the waxwork's build is a poor match for the victim, and its face is obscured by a mask. So the question is, why would the man do such a thing? Which brings us to 3 days ago, when the birdcage crashed into the Crystal Tower. If the birdcage had in fact contained not the body of Mr. Asman, but that same waxwork, the coroner from Scotland Yard who investigated Dr. Scythe would have noticed immediately. And yet, she submitted this autopsy report for the victim, which the court has seen earlier. Why?
Because the waxworks was that of the professor. Is that what you're saying?
Dr. Scythe put her name to a document confirming the death of a condemned criminal who was still alive. A criminal whose apparent resurrection was witnessed by Mr. Drebber. But that misconduct was a deadly secret the coroner would do anything to protect. Which is precisely why Mr. Drebber used that particular waxwork as the body double. Oh! My lord, this court must summon Dr. Scythe to the stand. The defense is determined to find out exactly how the coroner and Mr. Drebber are connected.
But according to the missive I received this morning through the prosecutor's office, Dr. Scythe is unable to participate in these proceedings. Is that not the case?
She told us so herself, didn't she? Lord Van Zeeks won't be summoning me as a witness. Lord Strongheart has forbidden it.
Lord Strongheart?
The Pandora's box you were warned about is the Professor case, but please don't make the mistake of thinking you'll get any information about it out of me.
Something happened on the night of that killer's execution 10 years ago, and surely nobody will want to get to the bottom of that more than Lord Van Zeeks.
The prosecution calls for the instructions in that missive to be scrapped.
But Lord Van Zeeks, the missive was issued from the Lord Chief Justice's office.
Objection!
The assigned prosecutor has the final say on policy in any particular trial. In other words, me.
Yes.
Let Enoch Drebber and Dr. Scythe both take the stands together.
Oh. Order! Very well, I will uphold your request. Bailiff, send a subpoena with the immediate effect addressed to Dr. Scythe of the Forensic Investigation Team. The woman is compelled to attend on Her Majesty's orders.
All right then. Enoch Drab and Dr. Scythe. If they weren't colluding with one another, this crime could never have been committed. I'm just a stone's throw away. I can feel it. The truth behind all of this is about to come out.
Thank you for your attendance at such short notice, Dr. Scythe.
I'm disappointed in you, Lord Von Ziegts. You've completely betrayed the agreed policy of both Scotland Yard and the prosecutor's office.
Betrayal is not in my nature, as long as the truth isn't compromised. If it is, if there's even a hint of wrongdoing, then no matter whom it concerns or disgruntles, I will pursue the matter to the bitter end, as would any prosecutor worth his salt.
Mr. Drabber, you took the victim's life by means of a machine that you constructed in your workshop. And Dr. Scythe, as the investigating coroner, you were the first on the scene to examine the victim's body. It is the belief of the defense that you collaborated with each other and were both complicit in this crime.
And where's your evidence?
At present, we have no definitive evidence, but we do have a very significant clue.
What are you talking about?
I'm talking, of course, about the waxwork. This model of the killer known as the Professor, who was sentenced to death 10 years ago.
You don't need to tell me. I witnessed the man's execution with my own eyes and officially pronounced him dead.
That remains to be seen.
Is that so?
According to newspaper reports from the time on the night following his execution, the killer came back to life.
Don't waste my time.
And the sole witness to that mysterious event was you, Mr. Drabber, wasn't it? If what you saw in the graveyard that night 10 years ago wasn't some chilling fiction, but reality, it would make you privy to a very great secret of Dr. Scythe's. A secret so profound, it could compel the coroner to agree to collaborate in your evil scheme in fact. Mr. Drabber, tell the court. Tell everyone the truth of what you saw that night in Lawgate Cemetery.
So you was the student who saw it?
You can see the resemblance actually, can't you? With the man who made him Tuspels, I mean.
Surely he's not going to claim that's really what he saw, especially after all these years.
He was a research student at the University of London, was he?
And a bit too clever for his own good, if you ask me.
What an interesting twist. When at the time, not one person would take me seriously. Yet now here we are, 10 years later, and suddenly my story matters. And in a court of law, too. Very well then, if everyone so wishes. Let's be frank, I'll tell you the truth of what happened that night, for what it's worth. So, Mr. Drabber, your testimony, please, about the events of that night 10 years ago. You will tell the court exactly what you stumbled across in Lowgood Cemetery. Yes, of course, as you wish.
In the cemetery 10 years earlier. Sorry, guys.
Sorry. The reason I was in Lowgood Cemetery at all 10 years ago was for a spot of moonlighting, shall we say. Yes, the illustration in that newspaper article was based on what I witnessed that night. But thinking back now, I realized that I never actually saw the professor. Soon afterwards, I was visited by a young woman who sculpted a model of me from wax. Then I gave up on my dream of becoming a scientist, and it was all because of that newspaper article.
Wait a minute. You're claiming you didn't actually see the professor now?
Of course, you'd have to have a screw loose if you believed the corpse could come back from the dead.
But so you're saying this article is...
Not worth the paper it's printed on. I think I would describe it perfectly, yes.
If the details in the article aren't true, it nullifies your argument for why Mr. Drebber and Dr. Syke would have been working together.
So he's discrediting himself to cripple my argument?
Tell me, witness. You claim to have been in the cemetery in some auxiliary business. Can you elaborate?
That's right, grave robbing to be precise. As you know, Logoed Cemetery is at the rear of Barclay Prison. So among students at the university, it had a reputation for being haunted by the ghosts of condemned convicts.
Grave robbing, you say?
Yes, exhuming fresh corpses to sell is reasonably lucrative. Of course, I never laid a finger on any valuables buried with the dead.
So you were one of the so-called resurrectionists, a particularly unpleasant scourge on society.
Actually, my fellows and I went by another name. The repurposers. Hard word.
That is quite beyond the pale. You would invite divine retribution, sir.
Yes, well, I think I suffered retribution enough. The Daily Circus eventually unearthed my name and put it in print. It caused me a great many headaches. In the end, I had to leave the university. That was the only paper with a bad grace to identify me unambiguously, I might add.
I see.
Out of interest, who drew the illustration for this article?
Ah yes, that was the reporter who exposed me. He sketched that right in front of me as I described the scene. Obviously, as time ticked on, I bitterly regretted what I'd done, claiming to have seen something I never truly saw. Foolish. Very foolish.
Well, counsel for the defense, you may proceed to the cross-examination now.
At once, my lord. The cross-examination in the cemetery 10 years earlier. I'm really sorry, guys. I know there's still some time for the half-hour mark, but this is going to take some time, I feel. And I don't want to stretch out the episodes too much. I promise this is going up as soon as I can put it up. So don't worry. Just tune in for the next episode of the Great Ace Attorney Chronicles. Resolve. See you then.